and individual reports are available from the ETF. So the report identified two main ways of understanding technology transfer: the vertical technology transfer and the horizontal technology transfer, both of which have important implications for the development of skills-related services to support technology transfer. By vertical technology transfer, we mean involving transferring technology from basic research to applied research to development, and it typically involves external research and development partners such as public research organizations. While horizontal technology transfer involves transferring established technology from one operational environment to another, often across international borders, as a result of foreign direct investment. So these skills-related services play a crucial role in supporting technology transfer in both vertical and horizontal contexts. And these services provide individuals, employees, and employers with the necessary information, training, and consultant services to develop and implement technology transfer, horizontally and vertically both. So it is essential to recognize the importance of these services and ensure that they are available to those who need them. In conclusion, I would like to thank all of you for your participation in this meeting and for your commitment to improving skills for technology transfer. Together, we can make a significant contribution to this future competitiveness of our economies and ensure that technology transfer plays a central role in driving innovation and growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Xavier. It's always a pleasure to have you on board with us. And well, now we would speak a little bit about the research from a little bit of a general presentation. Let me first introduce myself a little bit better. So my name is Ian Otero. As I said, I work I'm a human capital development expert at ETF. My area of expertise is mostly related to innovation policies and educational policy, and how these different policies converge. I am leading the work in the moment related to technology transfer in ETF, and we are working in one project, and I will talk a little bit more about this now. It's a project called Skills for Enterprise Development. So let me share very briefly a presentation with you. I hope by now everybody can see it. So let's talk about the skills dimension of technology transfer. What is this skills dimension? What do we mean when we're talking about this? Okay. So first, as I said, this whole work is being done within the project called the Skills for Enterprise Development. And we have the main aim is to increase the level of innovation with small and medium enterprises and increase competitiveness related to skills and innovation actors, increasing the synergies between these different actors and different policies in the ecosystems that we work. In the moment, we have been focusing on the Western Balkans. It's a possibility to maybe expand this in the future. So this research has been done within this project, and we had 3 different work packages. So the first work package, it's more a mapping. We try to understand who are the actors that exist in the field. The second work package has been a survey in which we try to understand what types of services, or what we're calling skills-related services, being offered by the actors that we have mapped in the first work package. And finally, work package 3, we had with the selection, and I think a lot of you have participated, or maybe the majority of you have participated in this work package 3, which was the interviews and the focus groups that we did with the institutions that provide services, or what we are calling skills-related services. So, as Xavier explained, we are working technology transfer in 2 different perspectives. One, what we call horizontal technology transfer, and the other one, the vertical one. Vertical one being the classic one that we usually talk when we talk about technology transfer, which is building research and transferring the knowledge from research all the way to market through creation of products, creation of specific services. So this whole process of development of a technology from 0 to, let's say, 100%. The other case, when you have a horizontal technology transfer, when you already have a technology that is developed in another place, and we are transferring this technology from one context to another context. So, for example, if we're talking about a technology that has been developed in one country from the European Union, for example, which is being transferred for countries outside the European Union. So this is what we usually describe as horizontal technology transfer. It's a concept that is not usually used, but we do believe that it's very important because it helps us, especially for the European Training Foundation, help us to understand how we can link the countries that we work with outside the European Union and the countries that we work with internally, or the European Commission that we work with internally. So skills-related services, it's an expression that we understand that different types of services can help individuals to develop skills. So it's not only training, it's not only formal education that will help individuals in the companies to develop the skills that they need to transfer technology. We also understand that, for example, services related to the provision of information, but also consulting services are also crucial to help developing the skills in the companies and the skills among the individuals who will work on the transferring of the technology vertically and horizontally. So we had a participation in the survey of 117 institutions from different economies in the Western Balkans, with public and private sector, with multiple different types of institutions that we have identified as service providers in their ecosystems. Finally, why are we doing this and what's the follow-up? So now we are sharing the results of the study, and the objective of this meeting, as Xavier well explained, is to give you a little bit of return. So you are the one who have participated in the analysis, you are the one who have provided us the insights from the focus groups, from the interviews, from the surveys. So now we want to present this back to you, and you have all the possibility now to say, I think this is wrong, I think something here might be complemented, and we are here to debate, to discuss. By the end of this meeting, we will have a good chance to have a moment to open for questions, and you please feel free to add anything that you think it's missing, or do you think that maybe needs more work on. It's open for you to provide your feedback. So we also have peer learning events that we are organizing, and a foresight exercise that we will do specifically in the sector of the agri-food. This is with a sector that we are focusing on this year, but maybe for next years we can look at for other sectors. But at the moment we are looking at peer learning events and foresight exercise focused specifically on what we call an agri-food sector, which is quite open space that involves both technology, for example, actors, but also producers, farmers. So it's a very diverse field of action. We also have a networking event. We are still working on some definitions on that. And we will have, finally, the idea is to be able to achieve partnerships, create partnerships between you, your institution, and companies that need your service. I think this is the end goal of this project, is what we would say as a success for this project. If we, by the end of it, if we are able to connect you with the companies that are in need of your service to be able to transfer technology. And of course, always focus from the point of view of the skills, the needs that they present in terms of skills services. What services can you provide that will make them better prepared to transfer technology from a skills point of view? So this is what we have for now. And now we're going to enter the world of the discussions about each of the different economies. And we're going to have now with us the national experts that have developed the studies. And first, I want to say here from our part, from the ETF, we are extremely thankful for the work that you have done. All the experts have done an amazing work, very committed team. And it, for us, has been a great pleasure to be able to work with all of you. So I would invite now our first expert to present. It's from Albania. Am I correct? Yes, Elona. So please, Elona, the floor is yours. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Oh, it's already stopped. Good. So Elona, yes, the floor is yours, and I'm looking forward to hear your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. So I assume Erica will share the presentation for Albania. First of all, I would like to thank all the Albanian participants who participated in the study, the respondents of the survey, those participants who were part of the semi-structured interviews, and as well those who participated in the focus group. I know some of them are present right now in the presentation in this call, and it would not have been made possible without their participation. So I'm very gladly to present the findings of the study concerning Albania, so we can go to the next slide. Okay, perfect. So as we can see, the policy framework concerning technology transfer reveals that Albania does have quite a consolidated policy framework towards science, technology, and innovation. We have a new strategy of intellectual property right. There have been new approved pieces of legislation that support technology transfer, but the problem is that the policy documents do not provide a definition towards technology transfer, and therefore no distinction, no differentiation is made between VTT and HTT. About S3, we can say that it's in an early state of adoption. And right now, though it is not reflected in the report, we have a draft national strategy for science, technology, and innovation, which is currently in negotiation, undergoing public consultation from the part of the government. And that will reflect quite some new achievements, including as well the opening of the TTOs in public higher education institutions. When it comes to the legislation, there have been quite some achievements, some progress from the side of the government when it comes to revising the regulation, normative acts, at the same time concerning intellectual property right, concerning the ownership between the employee and the employers. We have emerging regulation on the startups. We have the new law on startups, which was approved in 2022. And last year marked as well the establishment of the Science Technology Park. So the law on the Science Tech Park is the first legal act dedicated to R&D. When it comes to innovation and technology transfer, unfortunately, there is no law, again, that defines technology transfer per se. There is no single law on innovation. Right now, the government is starting back again the discussion on the draft law for science, which might include innovation. But again, the legislation is poor when it comes to technology transfer and innovation. Therefore, no distinction is being made between the two. However, if we could draw any conclusion on the legal provisions and the bylaws, we see an emphasis on research and development implied more towards supporting vertical technology transfer. Albania does have legacy and established institutions which support agriculture. And there is legacy of institutions like agriculture technology transfer centers, regional agencies for agriculture extension, which have been retained in agriculture. Nonetheless, also their role and their support from the government is somehow diminishing. We do not have consolidated institutions and actors on technology transfer in other sectors besides agriculture. We do have missing or lack of specialized actors and support units concerning technology transfer, in particular in higher education institutions. The new pieces of legislation and R&D somehow have removed the barriers, and they are providing incentives to opening technology transfer offices. Both the national strategy on intellectual property, at the same time, the draft strategy for science, technology, and innovation have allocated budget from two different ministries to open TTOs in universities. And when it comes to the the startup sector. Unfortunately, Albania does not have a business angel network or venture capital funds. Therefore, it remains scarce in this sector, in this regards. When it comes to funding, we do have public institutions that support funding. They are mainly the National Agency for Scientific Research Innovation and the National Agency which finances higher education, which both of them, as I mentioned, plan to fund the creation of TTOs. For the first time, Government Albania awarded public grants to startups and accelerators on digital innovation and in emerging technology through the startup funding managed by the Minister of State for the Protection of Entrepreneurship. And when it comes to the support of funding for R&D, is still low. And as we'll see as well in the other categories, we have the ability and the capacity to adopt new technologies, unfortunately, is low. Albania is ranked both low on the global competitive indexes and the global innovation indexes. It's in 2022, in 2021, it was the lowest ranked in its history. It was ranked 84th. And this is it can be explained through the insufficient capacity for technology absorption and research, development, and innovation due to insufficient public and private sector expenditure on research and development and low public funds allocated to research. Currently, Albania spends 0.25% of its public budget, 0.25% of the GDP to the research and development, whereas the initial objective was to have it 1%. Since this objective and target has not been met, the Minister of Education actually just stated yesterday in the consultation process for the national strategy that this target will remain to be achieved by 2030. So we will see how it will go until then. Therefore, on the same logic, again, the capacity for scientific and research is low, again, justified with the low public spending, low budget. The participation of the Albanian universities and its research institutes in Horizon program has been improved. However, it's still low. The low levels of innovation capacities, again, as we mentioned, can be attributed to low public spending on R&D. In terms of reform, Albania still performs better in innovation inputs rather than outputs. When it comes to the horizontal technology transfer, we see, which is the next slide, we do see an established policy framework, established strategies when it comes to employment skills. The digital agenda is as well a novelty in itself. Also on this line, the S3 is still at the early adoption. Albania has still not completed the entrepreneurial discovery process, unfortunately has lagged behind the region, and it is not sure whether it will meet the target of having the draft S3 by the end of this year for consultation next year. Also, the policies which indirectly, we can say, address horizontal technology transfer still does not make any distinction between VTT and HTT. And the legislation that supports HTT is mainly focused on providing incentives to attract foreign direct investments, providing support mainly to institutions that attract these FDIs like AIDA, and attracting as many foreign investors, giving them a special status as strategic investors.
Ilona, sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you for a second because your time is over, so we need to move very fast now. So if you can move to the next slide and
okay,
sorry,
okay, perfect. So, and as I was saying, the creation of these technology economic development areas, was just published, one of them recently yesterday. So again, we see some policy implementation improvements along the newly pieces of legislation approved on HTT from last year. So the scientific and research capacity and the ability to adopt new technology, both for HTT remains equivalent, the same with VTT. So therefore, we can go to the next slide. So the provision of skills related to support technology transfer in VTT. Well, as I mentioned, we do have support to support is established mainly in those organizations that have a legacy in providing technology transfer services, and we see more presence in information and training and much less in consulting. That is related to the fact that services strongly are linked to short-term donor-funded projects, and unfortunately, this support has been curtailed. And consulting support for VTT that requires access to facilities and expertise has been diminished, and that explains why we have less consulting services when it comes to technology transfer. There is limited support when it comes to other sectors beyond the agriculture sector. We do see general gap in all three types of services: information, training, and consulting beyond the agriculture sector. The latter benefits mostly for information and training on VTT, and to lesser degrees again on consulting services, because also it's argued as a lack of a tradition in delivering consultancies and consulting services in agriculture sectors, let's say prior 2006, when the centers were created. We definitely, the marked actions require a lot of support for startups, which are still in ideation phase. We have very few successful cases of scaling up of startups, and the improved and needed actions are more in other sectors besides agriculture. We do have the need for improvement actions to enhance consulting services, both in SMEs and large enterprises. Most of the funding and attention has been a lot in the startups in the last years. And of course, other required actions to improve the TT services relate to increase the number of enterprises, training program, upskilling and reskilling, but both of university staff who could be delivering these services if TTOs were in place. And if we move on the next slide to HTT, we have more a presence of a knowledge transfer rather than a classical and consolidated HTT, which consists mostly in introducing new methods and techniques, in particular in the agriculture sector, with the focus to improve the competitiveness of the private farms, of the startups, again, in the agriculture sector. Also in HTT, we see a domination by projects which are government-led, top-down, short-term, donor-funded initiatives, which does not create a consistency and sustainability when it comes to HTT. Unfortunately, companies in this sector, in HTT, in the field of digital technologies, they mostly conduct testing of technologies, and they export the tested technologies abroad. So we do not have local providers that really can support technology adoption, in particular in the small companies and across sectors as well. So definitely the needs and the gaps when it comes to HTT consist on difficulty to identify well-defined skills-based services to support HTT. We don't see a very clear portfolio, even when it comes to AIDA, which is the only institution responsible for running HTT policies in Albania. Of course, there is a lack of information, there is a lot related lack to information services on the skills related to emerging digital technologies. And again, also consulting here is less represented compared to information and training. And this is a similarity with VTT. On HTT, the primary focus and attention required is for SMEs and startups. So definitely there is these typology of organizations need a lot of support to scale up and to develop further. But at the same time, building capacities consisting on professional development, information and training of the institutions that provide these services to HTT. This is a very big required action, and it has been identified across sectors, across institutions, ranging from IPR training, to technologists per se. So with this, I close the presentation.
Thank you very much, Elona. I will now pass the floor for our next national expert. I don't have the list here. It's Milena, right, from Bosnia. Milena, are you there? Oh, you are. How are you doing, Milena? Thank you for being with us today. And yeah, looking forward for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just ask Erika to start the presentation. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll just start with a small disclaimer. I'm currently at a live event in Ohrid, so I'm at the hotel lobby. So if you hear any noises around me, so I don't have any control over it. So I apologize in advance for these kind of happenings. Anyways, thank you everyone for giving me the opportunity to present this work. And also for everyone who participated in actually making this possible, especially the people from this sector who are working daily on trying to make this happening. And I see this is presentation for Kosovo.
Milena, while we get the presentation, maybe we can start saying a few words about the
yes,
results.
I can start just now we are in Albania. One of the key things is, as you can see, that we in Bosnia and Herzegovina, as I always like to say, is we like to complicate things, since we have a lot of different levels of government, and when you try to kind of find one point of view on anything, you get lost very easily. And one of the key things that was evident very quickly from the get-go, and trying to figure out what's the situation on the policy level, is that we have very few things defined on the national level. There are some framework documents that kind of give us the guidelines, what's happening, and the rest is basically brought down to the level of the entities. And then again, you have on the entity of Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, a lot of things are even more trickled down to, yes, that's the one, is one slide before, for the vertical technology transfer. Please. And you have some kind of mix up.
Apologies, but the version I have this problem. It's the Kosovo and then goes to Bosnia, and I don't know why, but I have only these slides, so I'm not sure what.
So, Milena, do you think you can present the slide and we go through this?
Yeah, it's okay. I can make a note on some things that are both for the vertical technology transfer and for the horizontal one. And this is basically what I wanted to say with this different distribution, is that we have a little bit of a clear delineation about what is where the vertical technology transfer is and where horizontal technology transfer is, because basically the vertical technology transfer, if it's even dealt with, is mostly in the area of higher education and research sector. And the horizontal technology transfer is mostly in the sector and the policies that deal with companies. So basically, one of the biggest gaps that we have is actually the connection between the two, because we usually tend to look either one or the other. So there is a missing link here. And so, and another thing is that there are quite some big differences between the Republic of Srpska and specific cantons in the federation, because if usually the logic is if that particular organizational unit has higher education institutions, then it also has other documents that deal with technology transfer on that level. For the horizontal technology transfer, that is a little bit less of a problem because everybody has the need to deal with supporting companies, and horizontal usually means that we are trying to build the general capacity of companies for competitiveness on the global level. So basically, one of the ways this is done is through technology transfer. Lately, this usually means digital technology transfer, and there is a lot of things that are currently happening in this regard. Other strategies and policies that deal with these kind of things are usually those that are related to human resources, and most of the time, this is just general building capacity of the human resources to deal with the needs of the companies. So like gaining digital skills, learning how to use the machinery or things like that. But the general theme seems to be that we are lacking some specific types of skills here that are not represented in the any kind of training programs, regardless which level we are looking at. So this is a common theme. Other thing is that there are some legislation that specifically deal with the technology transfer, both versions, although in one of the entities, we actually have a specific set of documents that deal with kind of these kind of things. But generally, one thing that is at one national level defined is the intellectual property rights, and this is something that is dealt with on the national level as an exception to the rules, and this kind of works as such. We have the institutions who deal with it, but still there's quite a big of a gap of those who are supposed to be accepting those kind of support. For example, universities building up the patents or trying to commercialize them, having all the other legislation that should go within the institution, how to deal with it and things like that. So basically, this is missing on the company's level. They generally kind of ignore that the intellectual property exists. That's more or less of a theme. And they tend to ignore it both in terms of protecting their own and acquiring it from others. So this is something that has to be worked on extensively. For the actors and institutions who work in both of these fields, those that are dealing with vertical technology transfers tend to be located at the universities and some form of it, like Center for Entrepreneurship or supporting the research or technology transfer, while those who are working with horizontal technology transfer tend to be located more in the development agencies, chambers of commerce, and lately digital innovation hubs. So these are two things, like emerging themes, and one of the common theme is here, as this is just kind of emerging, that these kind of services are at their beginning. So we have quite a bit of number of issues and lacking of resources to actually handle this. But this, at least for the horizontal technology transfer, is currently in focus. So everybody's kind of working on it, while vertical technology transfer is mostly just ignored. Also on the funding front, although there is some funding for horizontal technology transfer specifically intended for companies to adopt the technology, there is basically none for vertical technology transfer. We don't have venture capital funds or anything like that. So basically we are lacking support there. So when we go there, then to figure out what are, can you just go back one slide? That here the thing that is also hindering the vertical technology transfer is investment in the research and development. So this was the last point that I wanted to make here. So we don't have the patents or papers with the higher impact factor, but also there is like no direct funding to support research institutions to work on things that are relevant to companies directly. So this is the part that is missing. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so what are some of the main strengths and weaknesses for both of these things? So for vertical technology transfer, one of the key thing is that that we are missing some very we do have some level of skill-based services, but they are very focused and mostly for the companies. And these are usually treated as innovation capacity building. but only from the side of the companies. For researchers, it's kind of still in the beginnings, and this is something that if it is done, it's done basically on, as I mentioned earlier, to try to build their capacity to create something that has potential to be transferred, more than actually working on the technology transfer. There is very small number. There are some, but there are very small number of those who are dealing with vertical technology transfer, and I would add that are actively doing this. There are some that occasionally do this, depending if we have a project, then we have a technology transfer services. Otherwise, we don't. And this is one of the key issues here, that since there is no structural support for this, this type of supporting programs tend to come and go. So sometimes you might have an institution, but the institution doesn't have an active program at that particular time. For general main needs and gaps, although like there is presence of all three types of services: information, training, and consulting for companies. Recently, we have some kind of emergence of more and more of this kind of support for innovation management and product development and market development, but still in their beginnings. And one of the key issues here is that we don't have a lot of experts who can deliver this kind of services, especially not in terms of like guiding companies through this kind of process. And also the companies do not have internal resources, human resources who can follow through within this process. And also generally that for vertical technology transfer services at the universities and in other institutions, there is still that lack of systemic integration. So basically what needs to be done is working with these kind of institutions to integrate it in their standard programs, including funding and the concrete activities and measures that are part of what the institution usually does, not on an ad hoc manner. Next slide, please. Okay, so for horizontal technology transfer, here we are having more and more actors, and this is happening very fast, that we are developing resources. As I mentioned earlier, one of the key things that started happening is the digital innovation hubs, and like we had 1 or 2 last year, now we have 15, so it's happening really fast. This is something that is in focus of all the institutions who are involved in this sector. However, as with vertical technology transfer, we also have here problem with the experts who are capable of leading companies through this process. So technology transfer consultants. We have people who can do specific solutions in this sector, but connecting the business and technology side is quite a big of a challenge. And this is something where we currently do not have neither enough nor sufficiently experienced local experts. So this is something where we need a bit of help. And there is, again, lack of continuity of this kind of services. What is a new emerging trend here is that quite a number of services, the demand is high. We have potential for commercialization of these services, so there's quite a number of initiatives here to trying to get this to be a fully commercial consulting service provided by mostly private actors, but there is also some public ones that are kind of playing in this field. Also, one of the things here is that what is needed in the information training consulting services for the companies, this is basically, we need this training for enterprise management and technology adoption, like understanding the benefits and processes, and then how do you actually do this within your specific context. For improvements, general improvements of the support sector, of course, we have this need to improve the supply of technology adoption consultants, as I mentioned earlier, and also to work with service providers to figure out how to do this consistently within the programs that they're already doing. So that would be my run through all the situations in as complicated the country is. the situation in the field is more or less the same. So it can be taken that all of these recommendations are valid regardless of which part of the Bosnia you are trying to do anything, regardless of the entity or local levels. The only difference might be that, for example, you might have more support for specific things, for example, in Sarajevo, where you have more companies or more infrastructure than, I don't know, in Herzegovina somewhere, in Mostar, for example. So these kind of things vary depending on how developed the economy and higher education at a certain location is. So this is the overall conclusion.
Thank you very much, Milena. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your presentation. I would like to ask now Lisa Kawe, who has also been working as the team leader of this team of consultants. She will be now presenting the case of Kosovo, and she will also later on will present a comparative analysis of all the different cases. Just also to highlight, colleagues, if you want, you can also generate questions and put the questions on the chat. And as I said, after the presentations, we'll have all the time to discuss all the questions. So please feel free to put your questions and we'll do our maximum to answer them. Thank you. Lisa, it's with you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we see the slides of Kosovo? And I'll see whether I need to share my screen or whether the slides that you have are the correct ones.
I think let's see, Ari. Very good. Thank you.
Can I have the first one for Kosovo? That looks good. Thank you very much. That's great. Okay, and I'll leave you to move them forward. So for Kosovo, let's have a quick look at what our main strengths and weaknesses are with regard to vertical technology transfer. Kosovo does have an innovation strategy, which I find positive, but it is now pretty out of date. And if we look at the rest of the policy framework, I would say it really does need further development. We have a lot of gaps there. And in terms of what we would often look to drive this, the S3, it's not present yet. The legislation, the framework is relatively well developed, although Kosovo faces particular issues because of its status. It's not fully recognized. That creates problems with the IP framework. And there is legislation relating to technology transfer that hasn't actually been fully adopted yet. And we would encourage Kosovo to try and get that out. The area probably I see most strengths in here are the actors, the networks, and the institutions. We do have strong groups out there, particularly at the University of Pristina with Venture Up, particularly with ICK and with some of the regional development agencies. Really, I want to highlight what they're doing in VTT. But they are very strongly dependent on external finance. They have to follow the finance. There are also some innovation fund grant schemes, but overall, there's low VC funding, and we're very much looking to the donor community to fund in Kosovo. It's always good that the funding is there, but it does mean that it very strongly dictates what's happening. And in terms of Kosovo's the ability to adopt new technology, it isn't benchmarked, so I want to be careful. But I think we would say that overall, the impression is that apart from in ICT, we don't have strong ability in the companies to adopt innovative new technology from the universities. And if we look at the universities themselves, they are dropping now down the rankings within the region, and that is a point of concern because it will make it harder for them to access EU funding as well. So overall, bit of a mixed picture for VTT. Can we move to HTT? We can go to the next slide. Some of the things here we would say you would see in both, and I don't want to labour that point where we've said that as well. One of the positive things is that within IT strategy, it does actually recognise the need for skills development, which is in some ways unique within the region. There are not many economies that can claim that. However, it doesn't in any way look at HTT or VTT, and there is not really a visible strategy for foreign direct investment, and that's always very closely related to horizontal technology transfer. We don't see financial incentives at the moment for foreign direct investment, and it is very low. Again, if we go to the actors, networks, and institutions, you are seeing some strong or visible players out there, although they do not view themselves in particular as supporting HTT or VTT at all. They're not focused on that at all. So overall, if we look at the capacity to adopt new technology that's fully developed, there doesn't seem to be a strategy, and where we see activity, particularly through donors, it's not necessarily focusing on sectors that would particularly benefit and use new technologies. Can we move on then? We take to the next slide. So the provision of skills-related services for VTT. Again, strong commonalities between VTT and HTT. There appears to be an awareness of the concept, and people would say, well, we provide innovation, information training and consulting. Some of this is done beyond the borders of Kosovo, but it is actually very limited. It is tied to funds. And you wouldn't really see very obvious visibility of services to support VT because they are very much based around projects. So the donor will decide how much mentoring or how much training is going on. It does feel as if there really would be an improvement action in trying to expand provision of services beyond startups and particularly beyond university startups and try and take them into more established companies within Kosovo, and to make it more obvious the palette that is being offered rather than we have a project. It's also very clear that it would help a lot if some of the legislation in the pipeline was further implemented. We don't often say this, but a lot of people say they would really like the policymakers more involved in this. They would like this to be driven through policy. And although some sectors are highlighted as really being able to benefit from vertical technology transfer, we don't have sector-specific services developed at all at the moment. It just doesn't seem to have emerged. If we look finally then at HTT, and I'll move my slides forward as well. Okay, here. HTT really isn't very visible in Kosovo. There are groups, the regional development agencies, and for example, the university incubator was able to highlight examples of where they had come in and they had helped companies to adopt fully mature technology. But compared to the idea of transferring technology from a university to a company, it didn't seem to be a concept that was as well grasped. And there aren't clear services to support this, for example, through a digital innovation hub at all. So I think that is an area where certainly we would say that there certainly seems to be a gap. Whether there is really a need for it, whether there would be a demand for it, is another question. So I think it would be one very strong improvement action to go out and see to what extent there is appetite and need for setting up horizontal technology transfer services, on what format should they be taking? Should they be starting with ICT? Should they be starting with information perhaps there? And I think if we look at the sector issue, you have got ICT startups being supported broadly across Kosovo. Clearly, they're a dynamic part of the environment at the moment, but it's very much about supporting them to develop their own technology rather than supporting them perhaps to take advantage of fully blown technology that would make their startup more competitive, more scalable, take it out to the outside world faster. And what we aren't seeing at the moment are sector priorities in Kosovo with relation to horizontal technology transfer and innovation. They appear that they are not visible in the landscape to us as a team at the moment. And I will stop there. I hope that's a short overview of Kosovo.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time taking. You helped us to get a little bit back to on track. So now I would like to ask for your next participant. So it's Branka from Montenegro. Branka, are you there?
Yes. Hello to everyone. Hello, Jan.
Hello, Branka.
So
nice to see you. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall I have the presentation from Erika? Although I agreed to share mine, but if this is the principle, maybe it's easier.
I think Erika will share, no, Erika?
Okay. I would like also to greet all the participants and to thank them, those who participated in the study. I think it was an interesting study to carry out and novel in a few ways. Jan, you mentioned at the beginning that the terminology is also something that maybe hasn't been accepted as standard yet, but I think this study makes a good contribution to labeling things as vertical technology transfer and horizontal technology transfer and to think of both of them, and perhaps in a comprehensive way. Because I think that is an important point for the whole study that we arrived at. So the first part of the presentation deals with the desk research that we made, and the second part is dealing with the survey and focus group that we carried out. So I can say that similar as in other countries of the region, we do have some part of the policy well developed, especially in Montenegro. Smart specialization strategy is rather well promoted, and specifically vertical technology transfer is an integral part of this policy. However, the downside is that technology transfer competencies are not clearly addressed in the policies. So we don't have them mentioned practically in any strategy. On the part of legislation, Montenegro is rather well advancing in the adoption of the EU legislation. However, there are a lot of challenges in the enforcement implementation of this legislation. In particular, what was seen in the strategy for intellectual property, that there are a lot of challenges on the side of human resources exactly. As far as the actors, networks and institutions, we can say that because of the strong push of the innovation policy, we see established and developing new specialized players, such as Innovation Fund of Montenegro and important ICT cluster as a business support organization. Also, currently, there is an initiative to establish the National Technology Transfer Office. On the side of the funding, we see the dominantly funding for the lower technology readiness level for science-business collaborations, and generally a lack of funding for programs related to education and training that would be specifically for vertical technology transfer skills. A good side in our survey was that we saw that there is some change in university promotion policies, and since recently they have introduced linkages to technology transfer activities of professors as one criteria, as several criteria for academic progression, so that we expect actually that this becomes more and more important in the country, and that this technology transfer starts to happening much more often and regularly from professors themselves, because it is in the interest of their promotion as well. Next slide, please. As regards the horizontal technology transfer, it is not promoted through one specific policy, but through several sectoral policies, such as industry and competitiveness, energy and agriculture policies. However, we lack coordination between these policies, and also the investment policies, of course, important in this part. What we see from the side of actors, networks, and institutions is that they are underdeveloped and specifically related to certain municipalities, and thus not covering the whole territory of Montenegro. And on the positive side, we also see, like in Bosnia, that digital innovation hubs have been emerging, and that they have been bringing a really significant impulse in this part of activity of horizontal technology transfer. And also on the building, on the side of the specifically on the building of expertise and skills, and even professionals who can who start to deal with these activities. On the side of funding, there is a good support in Montenegro that is provided for equipment purchase, for modernization of equipment, and this is actually the main way how horizontal technology transfer is being understood in Montenegro. So the purchase of equipment is practically being equalized with this technology transfer. So this is through grants or subsidized loans and through investment promotion measures like tax subsidies. However, the lack of support for upskilling and reskilling is sometimes really making a big barrier for investments themselves. So we see that investors appreciate these tax subsidies and support for equipment, but that we don't have established ways how to train the staff that is needed for those new establishments. Next slide, please. So here, when we asked our participants in the focus group and in the survey about strengths, gaps, and improvements that are needed, we see that we saw that they also say that some mentoring support for startups existed, but they said that that the formal availability of support is very weak. There are no regular service providers, and actually not no institutional tradition in this, except for, I can say, also in the agricultural sector, where we have these extension services, but not so much related to technology adoption as to other general services. Also, the awareness of the difference between the VTT, HTT, and the general business services is not very very developed. Please, next slide. So our participants thought that technology transfer trainings need to be structured and standardized, and not one-off and general. So that we really need to develop professionals in this field, because we have seen quite a few of different trainings, one-day trainings, information events, and so on. But we really need to have specialized institutions and consulting businesses, and really well-trained staff people for these services, which are quite demanding, really knowledge intensive, and really require well-trained people for this. And they're very complex, of course, in themselves. So we also see that people are thinking that technology transfer office will make this improvement, but also that current service providers, which exist in some parts, need to better develop their capacities. In the sector, we see also the dominance of the ICT sector. Next slide, please. As for the horizontal technology transfer, we have seen some provision of services that was dedicated to support horizontal technology transfer, for example, intellectual property rights trainings and information. We saw that the EU digital innovation hubs make good effect. However, there is still a pretty big lack of awareness of the HTT and the specific needs and the general environment that is present in the country about what is HTT, what is VTT, what would be the exact services, is still at a very low level, and participants stated that this is the starting point where we need to initiate. So also the services are needed for all types of enterprises, not only for the startups, which are currently pretty much in the focus we have seen throughout the region. And also, of course, to state again that consulting services are crucial in this aspect, and that capacity is needed especially for this type of services and professionals. And so thank you very much.
Thank you, Branka. Thank you so much for your presentation. I would like to call now Gabriela from North Macedonia. Are you there, Gabriela?
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, Jan. Good afternoon to everyone. It's a pleasure to be part of the study and of the event. I would just very briefly like to thank all of the participants in the study from Macedonia that supported the process. It would have not been possible without your valuable input. So thank you very much once again. And of course, to all of the participants to this event, and looking forward to your questions and comments. So looking at our findings we will start as my colleagues with the main strengths and weaknesses concerning the vertical technology transfer. you will find in our case, as in the other economies, that we have some similarities between VTT and HTT, so I will try not to repeat myself and only look at what is important for these two types of VTT and what is distinguishing them. So looking at the policy framework, we have overall very, very sound innovation policy framework. It has been improving for many years now. And it's positive that technology transfer is not only addressed in the innovation strategies as such, but it has been some parts of it addressed in the education policy as well as in the SME and industrial policy. But what is on the negative side is that at the moment the innovation strategy is currently expired. And we are just in the very early phase of the smart specialization strategy development. So once this will be accelerated and once we have the X3 strategy, I think that this gap will be somehow breached. But what will remain if we don't address it is the lack of looking at the different types and modalities of technology transfer, because at the moment the policy framework does not distinguish between VTT and HTT, or vertical and horizontal technology transfer. So it's just technology transfer as a general term, and also does not focus on technology transfer related skills or skills-based services or competences. So this will need to be further addressed, and hopefully in the smart specialization strategy this will be addressed. And this is the right time because we are basically now working on it. Legislation, when it comes to the legislation framework, I think that we do have, and not myself only, but also the people participating in the study, that we have an adequate and comprehensive legislative framework for technology transfer. It has been a great momentum having the law on innovation activity, so that certain terminologies there is defined. So especially if you look at the way how we regulate the technology transfer infrastructure, the activities and investments. But once again, as mentioned by some of our colleagues today, we do have a challenge when it comes to IP enforcement. This remains a challenge, how we enforce it in practice. The commercialization of patents is not encouraged enough when it comes to vertical technology transfer. And if you don't have something innovative, then there is nothing that you can transfer. So this is also one of the problems that we have identified. And also looking at the IPR rights or IP rights in technology transfer, they are not specific enough. Who does what are the different types of, the technology developer and technology receiver. So this is something that we really need to work on in the future. And when it comes to the actors, networks, and institutions, the situation is improving. The ecosystem is evolving, is diversifying. We have some well-established actors. We have some new actors being established recently. So it is a sound basis for vertical technology transfer, but still the support as such is very limited, and there is a lack of support for industry, academia linkages, and systemic approach to technology transfer service provisioning. So let's just say, it's basically on ad hoc basis, and it still needs to be, we need to work on the systemic provisioning of services. For the funding, we have gained the momentum with the establishment of the Fund for Innovation and Technological Development. It does support vertical technology transfer. So in that sense, we do have positive developments. But looking at the benchmarking, we are still not good when it comes to capacity to adopt new technologies and to scientific research capacity. Basically, we have the limited resources, human resources for R&D, and we still continuously face the low level of research funding as an obstacle. So this is in a nutshell what we have identified for the VTT. Can we please move to the next slide? Thank you. Looking at the horizontal technology transfer, similar as for the VTT, the innovation and the legislation framework is more or less sound. It's there, we can use it as a good sound basis for developing. But once again, we're still working on the smart specialization strategy, so we don't know in which direction, in which sectors it's going to evolve, what will be the exact support for the technology transfer towards the private sector. So we will have to, have a look at it once it is being developed. And especially when it comes to legislation, the IP enforcement remains a challenge, and we still need to define better the TT collaboration between the academic and the private sector, and between the private sector and the other companies, so that we really need to work on the IPR and TT collaboration to be specific enough. This year, we are marking 15 years of Enterprise Europe Network presence in our region, in our countries. So it's great that we have the Enterprise Europe Network. It's a great tool for the horizontal technology transfer. And it's also sort of a good thing that we are starting to have the digital innovation hubs, but they're still very, very in the early stage. We have only one fully registered one, and we are looking at several other applications emerging. So I think that this will make a real momentum for horizontal technology transfer services once it is fully operational. And we also are facing some weaknesses related to the cluster support activities. So we do have a low level of cluster support activities. And once again, the skills dimension for technology transfer is considered only on an ad hoc basis by the actors and institutions for the horizontal technology transfer. For the funding here, we have the sort of a mixed situation. We do have technology extension services available, but they are at a very small scale. So we do expect more developments when it comes to funding for HTT. And what we have been identifying and experiencing is that the private firms are still conservative about adopting new technologies. And one of the reasons might be the low level of technology transfer related skills. And on the other hand, we don't have sufficient attention to the horizontal technology transfer or to technology transfer as such by the training providers. So we need to think about how to strengthen this part with the technology adoption or TT and innovation management, including IPR. And once again, the scientific and research capacity is quite limited, and the low level of research funding impedes the HTT development in the country. Now looking at what we can summarize as the main strengths and weaknesses for the VTT and HTT. We've seen in the study that there is a reasonable understanding that there is a need and benefit of the support for the VTT, but at the moment there are few, if any, services that specifically support VTT in enterprises, and there is a lack of IPR services that will regulate the overall process of technology transfer. So we can say that at the moment there is a general need to develop all types of services for VTT at this time. So we do need information, training, and consulting on technology transfer, IP commercialization, innovation management, all of these aspects to support the knowledge-based, the skills-related, services for VTT. And to achieve this, we need to work on the capacity building of service providers, because if we want to have all the different three types of services on all different steps of the vertical technology transfer, we need to work on the capacities of the service providers. Looking at the HTT, the situation is a bit better in a sense that we have some defined support for horizontal technology transfer. There are some organizations, including Test Before Invest, but if you look at the overall portfolio of business and innovation support services available in the country, it is still very limited, and it's not sufficiently specialized support. So therefore, we need to work on improving, on one hand, the promotion of benefits of HTT in enterprises, so information and training, to increase their adoption capacity and their awareness of what they can achieve from HTT. But at the same time, we are facing a situation where we don't have sufficient consulting services, as mentioned by my colleague experts, that we still need to work with the consulting companies and encourage them to include technology transfer services in their portfolio. This will be really helpful. And above all, we need to work with the capacity, with the service providers, so that we do have the capacities to provide this type of services, information, training, and consulting services. And there was an idea when we discussed in the group that it might be good to have a formal training that will provide verified expertise, like a verified expert for technology transfer, something that will provide or to be provided by a certain program or the VET provider or something like that. So this is in a nutshell what we have identified for both VTT and HTT in Macedonia. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Gabriela. Now we have our last participant from Serbia. We have Maljan. I never know if I say your name correctly, and I'm very sorry if I say it badly. But please correct me and please pronounce it correctly. I'm still learning how to say the names and from the region. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Jan. Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for this opportunity to present the results of Serbia. So my name is Mlađan Stojanović, and let me just try to share my screen. Okay, so do you see it?
Yes, we see it.
Okay,
But
great.
it's not
We
in
do,
that. Yes.
yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And we see the end of it rather. Fine. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, we go to the beginning. So if we are talking about the ecosystem and specifically vertical technology transfer ecosystem of Serbia, we can say that it is characterized by the very dynamic and rapid development of the ICT sector, and then specifically the sector of ICT startups. And I mean, what we have seen in the past 10 years is the transition of this sector from let's say typical work for hire. So when people work for foreign clients, to more technology development and heading towards what VTT actually is. So technology development, and logically the provision of services is mainly focused around this sector. On the other side, for instance, the public R&D sector that is also receiving a lot of attention in terms of trainings, consulting services, and all other services, still is not as dynamic, and we can say that it underperforms in terms of vertical TT compared to let's say ICT private sector ICT. If we are looking at the policy framework, technology transfer is often quoted in different strategies. For instance, strategy for innovation, R&D, even higher education, smart specialization, of course. But what is I think common with other, or at least in Serbia, this is pretty much a rule. Technology transfer is often referred to as to technology adoption. Rarely, I wanted to say technology development. In very few occasions, technology is when somebody quotes technology transfer, it means technology adoption. So logically, the policy legislation and everything else is largely focused on vertical TT. In terms of legislation, as in some of the other countries, the legislation is reasonable. It is fragmented across a number of laws. There are probably 15 different laws that deal with technology transfer, or rather enabling technology transfer. So IP, IPR laws, R&D laws, higher education law, innovation, and so on. And recently we had changes in the legislation that introduced the tax breaks for companies and investors. And specifically, I can mention IP box, so the tax breaks that reduces the amount of tax that you pay for licensing proceeds from the technology that the company commercializes. Actors, if we look at the community, we see that we have more or less two groups of actors. So the traditional ones, university, research institutes, and faculty, chamber of commerce, and the new ones that are created mainly around the ICT scene, and there we have a lot of intermediaries such as science, technology parks, business, digital innovation hubs in general that work quite well in the past 10 years and cater to this group of companies. Some of these institutions provide funding as well. Innovation Fund, for instance, provide dedicated funding for mainly vertical TT projects, but there are other actors as well who do that. Recently, for instance, this year, we expect to have 3 dedicated venture capital funds registered in Serbia who will basically invest into startups developing their own technologies, and we have one regional fund who is also focused on Serbia. If we are talking about the capacity to adopt new technology. There is indeed capacity in startups, and little less in traditional SMEs. Regarding the scientific and research capacities, it basically correlates well with the increase of the amount for R&D by the government. However, if we look closely into the scientific output, we see that the quantity actually dominates over quality. So the amount of scientific articles, for instance, or the citations in the top journals is lower than it is expected. Innovation output, on the other hand, is pretty much at the level of an EU average, which is a little bit of a surprise, having in mind much lower amounts of investment in innovation. If we are talking about the needs and the gaps in VTT space, I think there is one general conclusion, which basically comes from the number of technology transfer deals. I mean, if we don't have sufficient number of technology transfer deals, there will be no rich portfolio around this area, and this is what we see. Also, there's a specific gap in the provision of services to enterprises. So much less services is committed to traditional SMEs compared, for instance, to services to the researchers. Mentoring popped up very often as something that in the analysis, all the interviews, most of the interviewees actually quoted as something that is required. In terms of services, the analysis showed that what is lacking in the field are the services that are more business oriented, that are targeting, let's say, higher end development services or higher technology readiness levels, which is pretty much in line with the status of the innovation ecosystem that still focuses on early stage development, research development programs. In terms of the environment, the capacity at those institutions that provide services should be increased so they can provide it more, and that is often a bit problematic. So one evident example is the Intellectual Property Office, who actually caters to pretty much all groups of companies of different size, international, local, regional, and it has in their portfolio information, training, and consultancy services. But all this is not the core business of Intellectual Property Office. It is rather, of course, registration and management of intellectual property rights. So the staff who does these services actually does it only in the time when they can. So it is never their priority. If we are talking about the horizontal TT, there is.
Sorry, Milan, I was just going to have to ask you to do this very shortly. This last slide, if you can wrap it up in 2 minutes so that we can have a little break before the comparative analysis. Thank you.
Despite the high and significant amount of foreign direct investment, we didn't see a lot of activities in the technology, let's say, related to technology adoption. That's a little bit that was a little bit strange. It probably has to do with the fact that that companies don't want to share that. I mentioned the policy framework. There's a big focus on vertical technology transfer. HTT is not covered explicitly in any of the strategic documents, and beyond just talking about foreign direct FDIs, foreign direct investments, there is no any kind of analysis on HTT. Legislation is adequate, largely harmonized with the acquis, and I wouldn't say we have any problems in there. As far as the players in the system, we have a couple of distinct players such as Europe Entrepreneurship Network. We have the Intellectual Property Office that I mentioned, Development Agency of Serbia, and Center for Digital Transformation, who offer specific services to companies that are willing to undergo digital transformation. And I think this is probably one bright example of how a very, very specific and tailored services should look like. And finally, in terms of needs and gaps, I think especially in horizontal TT, there's a big gap. I mentioned some of the good examples of service providers, but there we have a big problem even on the level of understanding what horizontal TT is. I mean, apart from this general notion that it's related to technology adoption, there is really no clear understanding. So I think in terms of improvement actions, we have to focus on the basics, increasing awareness and on the terms of what actually is, and mentioning and using, focusing on horizontal TT in strategic documents so that we can start analyzing it, measuring it, and explaining to the companies what that is. In the absence of that, we can't really expect to have a very good service provision around and service portfolio around horizontal technology transfer. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much. And I guess we are now open for questions.
Yes, no, thank you. For now, what we're going to do is the following. We're going to have a 3 minutes break, just so that everybody has a little bit of time to get a glass of water and brief a little bit. You received a lot of information from all the different cases and all the different economies. So what are we going to do? 3 minutes break. When we come back, Lisa, as the team leader of the team of experts, she will present also very briefly a comparative overview, what is different and in common across all the cases. And then we're going to open for the discussion for everybody to open to put questions. So feel free to already put your questions in the chat. Okay, so we'll be back in 3 minutes. So, and yes, exactly 3:30. Okay, see you in 3 minutes. Thank you. Hello, everybody. We are back. I hope you had the time to stand up a little bit, shake the bones, maybe get some water, some coffee. So now we'll have Lisa again with us. Lisa, she will present a comparative overview of the analysis. I will ask you, please, Lisa, to do it shortly so that we can still have some time to discuss with everybody. And again, if you have questions or points to highlight, please use the chat in the moment, but you also have the time later. Okay, Lisa, with you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have the slides, please? Could we bring the slides up for this? If that's possible. And while they're coming up, I know everybody has thanked those who participated in the survey, and they were absolutely critical. We couldn't have done it without them. Just briefly at this point, I would like to thank the team who have been fantastic and have broken new ground. But also to recognise and acknowledge the work of Great Advisory, who have supported us immensely through this project over a lot of months. They're often invisible, which is probably the best way to be if you're backstopping, because it means that everything's under control. But our thanks, please, to Great Advisory too on this one. Let's take a quick look then at where we see commonalities, differences, perhaps some talking points for us as we go forward. So you've just heard about all 6 of the economies. So what I now want to do is just pick out a few points which I hope were clear to you, and we emphasize them a little bit more. So in terms of commonalities, what we would say is that the arrival of smart specialization across the region clearly is very strong commonality here. And it's particularly important because whether it's vertical or horizontal, technology transfer is just a way of innovating. And smart specialization strategy on the whole is a strategy for innovation, although it does tend to focus more on vertical than on horizontal. The regions at different positions at the moment in terms of adopting strategy, as Serbia has done, all the way through, as I said, to it being very nascent at the moment in Kosovo. But S3 is going to drive this landscape. So it's really important that we look at the extent to which smart specialization strategy is also dealing with the skills dimension. In terms of the legal aspects, I think what we're also seeing here is the way that the EU, that the pathway to EU membership is driving legislation through the acquis. Some of the countries you can see are very firmly now on board with this in terms of having the legislation, although a number of people have said, particularly in IPR, it's not being enforced very hard. And in terms of aspects like research and development and capacity to absorb technology, we would say actually that there are quite strong commonalities across the region, probably because sadly investment in R&D is low across the region, and capacity to absorb technology within companies is also low across the region. Although I think we really do need to highlight there aspects like Serbia, which is now starting to really take money from the European Commission for research. So they're managing to make big inroads through Horizon, and that really is very important in how it's changing the landscape. And again, at the other end of the scale, the degree to which we see some universities that are now slipping down the rankings, and that's important to note, because if they can't take advantage of EU funding, they're cutting that off as a form of funding for them. And in terms of capacity to absorb new technology, again, it appears to be very low, but we are seeing some good examples. So I would highlight Bosnia and Herzegovina, where they've used horizontal technology transfer, particularly in areas like machining, and they are now combining their expertise and skills in machining, along with slightly lower labour costs, in order to be able to provide services to countries like Germany. So that's been really very positive. In terms of differences, one of the ones I would pick up on is the state of innovation funding across the region. So Serbia has an innovation fund. It's changed the landscape. North Macedonia has an innovation fund that is moving in that direction. It's an earlier stage. Montenegro is setting up an innovation fund. And for the other 3 countries, they do not have innovation funds. I see the note from Mentor Adventure Up that there's going to be an innovation voucher scheme in Kosovo, but the innovation funds are transformation. And the other area I think that is quite different across the countries is the degree to which they do have actors and networks and institutions. And again, you would see the link. Smart specialization strategy is driving Serbia, I think, in this direction of really bringing things together and driving them forward. And where you don't see smart specialization, the number of actors involved and the diversity of actors is a lot lower. So a small country like Kosovo, we're still seeing that there are only a few strong actors involved. Can I have the next slide? Thank you. So if we look at a bit at where we have skills-related services and we look at commonalities across the region, overall, very low provision of service and very few support providers. Those that were interviewed and responded very often would say, oh yes, we provide the whole palette. We provide information, we provide training, we provide consulting. And then when you say, but what are your services specifically? Information on vertical technology transfer, or specifically consulting on horizontal technology transfer, that's the point where it becomes clear that they are not. They are, on the whole, general support services where people will say, well, we will mentor, we do business planning, we help people secure project-based funding, but actually it's not specific. And if we look at where you do have strong VTT services, for example, and here I want to perhaps highlight the work that is going on in Kosovo with Venture Up, it is very strongly based on project funding, which means it doesn't have continuity, it doesn't have sustainability, and the donor is the person who is actually going to dictate how many trainings, how many mentorings, and who they get offered to. And donors are often very good at doing this. I wouldn't want to say they weren't, but I think there is also a need for something that is not just based on project funding. The other noticeable commonality is the presence of EEN in the region, who provide a portfolio of services, same one in every country. This is because EEN provide that portfolio of services in every country they are in. So it shouldn't come as a surprise, but it's a really good example of how this can be done. And I think it is something I would like to see the digital innovation hubs move towards too. There's a lot of potential in digital innovation hubs to replace the work of associations, particularly in HTT, where they could be laying out the same palette. If we look at the differences here, some countries clearly have a historical legacy in supporting, in particular, VTT and HTT. I would say Albania. Not only do they have a historical legacy for agriculture, it's very firmly focused on the agriculture. It's agricultural extension services. And some of the countries seem to have retained this and units that support it, research and within government organizations. Others have not. And the clusters have not replaced them. And again, I would look across and perhaps I would say, if we look towards Serbia, I had expected that the clusters in Serbia would have been very strong at supporting adoption of technology for their members that would make them more competitive. And that wasn't visible in the survey that we did. And again, some of the differences, very definitely some countries have much more strategy and policy and funding for innovation that's new to the world. So this attempt to push more universities to valorize their research results, to commercialize their technology and transfer their research results. And others, you do actually see that there is quite strong visibility for HTT as well. And on that, I think I would probably say we clearly see examples in Bosnia, and I think we're seeing examples in North Macedonia too. And it's really useful to be able to look at them and say, how could we replicate them elsewhere? Can we move on to the next slide? Right, so needs, gaps and improvement actions. In this, I would say that these are largely commonalities. I might highlight some for different countries, but I would say that on the whole, we would be suggesting that this is something that any of the 6 economies could be acting on at the moment. One of them being raising awareness of the benefits of technology transfer. Why should companies be engaging with it? Why should more organizations be trying to offer support services? When we talk to different service providers, often they can give an example, 1 or 2 of companies that they have worked with, but they are not actually, I think at times, recognizing this is H or VTT. They just see that it's a company that they helped. And a much wider sharing of relevant examples, I think, would be useful, certainly for the companies, understanding what they could get out of it, but actually for people who are providing services to realize that this is something they could be doing. This is a service they could be providing, and there would be a benefit to their target customers. So I'd like to see much more sharing of relevant examples and case studies. There's also certainly scope for providing what I would call a portfolio of support services. So trying to get, for example, regional development agencies to say, we will set up an information service on where you can go for VTT. One training service on how you could do digital transformation in your company, and one consulting service, which might be starting with innovation, something quite broad. And I'm out of time, I'm being buzzed at. And I would say also sector-specific support linked down to S3, because we're still not seeing that. So where countries have said, these are the sectors that are particularly important to us, we should be saying, right, and now we set up support around them. And the starting point for this really ought to be end user needs. And I say this because although we can say, our survey, this research shows there's very little provision of support. There are very few people doing this. It's very in-specific. It's not sector-specific. The question really should be, who needs it? Who wants it? Who values it? Who can afford to pay for it? So who would actually be making sure that it was sustainable? So one clear action going forward before everybody rushes out to launch skills-based services to support either type of tech transfer would be to say, let's do an end user need at this point, and then let's start building those services and building those skills around that portfolio. Yeah, and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I always get impressed with your capacity to summarize so much information. Thank you very much, because I think that really makes it easier for everybody to understand what where we wanted to address, or where we wanted to achieve to get with this study. There are many different points that for my part, I would like to highlight. I think especially, as has been mentioned, the points that we have of the difference between vertical technology transfer and horizontal technology transfer. It's very interesting how we do not find this very often clearly described in legislations. We hear, for example, how horizontal technology transfer is very much let alone for the level of the companies, because we also know that this is usually a type of activity that bigger companies have higher capacity to do technology transfer, and maybe they need less support of the government. I guess the main question is the companies, as SMEs, small companies, that would also need support to have access to technologies that are not available in their context. How can we support them in this sense? And I think also very interesting is that we started this exercise asking ourselves what is the needs that that the companies might have to transfer technology. And I think to a certain extent, we are finishing this exercise thinking, what are the skills that the service providers need to develop to better support the companies, which is an interesting conclusion of this study that we did not foresee. We did not foresee that in the end we would come up with a result that is much more related to the needs of the skilling and supporting those who will support the companies. So we see, for example, the aspects of technology transfer officers. It's an element for me that's very interesting to discuss now. What is their level of competence? What are the type of competences that they need to have? And what type of training, for example, support they receive to do their work? So these are just a few things that are coming to my mind. There's so much, I think, to say. But above all, what I really wanted now, and I think would be amazing, is to hear from the participants that have participated in the focus group, that have participated in the surveys. What do you think? Do you think that these results are fair? Do you think it makes sense from the point of view of what has been discussed in the interviews in the focus groups? I would very much like to hear you now. So if you want to take use the chat for making commentaries, or if you want to raise your hand and have the time now and microphone to say something, please feel free. We are really into looking forward to hear something from your side. Also, in the moment we actually, we got a question from the link, the YouTube, because our meeting is also being transmitted, it's streamed in YouTube. So we have a question I'm not sure if it's a question or if it's just a commentary. Yes, no, it's just a commentary saying from a specific organization that it's also interested in continuing the discussion, continue working, and especially what we said, we wish that we can at some point help you to be in contact with the companies and SMEs that we have identified that are innovative and that are interested in using your services. So this is the end goal that we should, at some point, for example, by the end of the year, have more clarity. What types of companies and what type of institutions can we help to get together, to connect, and see how your services would link to their needs? So for us, for example, it would be very important to know who is interested, who would be available, or who would be, with an interest of continuing this process in the end and for the next months, and continue to keep in touch, to have so to say, a part of our network of institutions that we work with, so that we can in the future link you with other companies. We also had a question in the chat, and the chat asked about if we're going to share the results of the study. So from now, what we have planned is we will, and we are editing now, finishing the comparative report. So we have a comparative report that will be edited and will be shared with everybody as soon as possible. I imagine maybe by the end of next month, we will be finished the editing and we'll be able to share with everybody. Okay, so for now, I don't see any specific chat. I don't see anybody with their raised hand, with the hands raised. If that's the case, I will please ask, oh no, wait, we have some here. Branka, greetings from Belgrade. What are the key economic sectors in which VTT flourish? Same question for HTT. That's a very interesting question. Thank you. Lisa, maybe you can help us to answer this question from a comparative perspective. Do you see VTT as more clear, something that goes towards one economic sector, and HTT towards different economic sectors?
It isn't something that could ever be generalized. This is why, for me, this ties in so closely to smart specialization, because if you've got your smart specialization strategy done correctly and your analysis done correctly, then the sectors that you are highlighting as being the ones that are most important for the country are the ones that you would feed, in particular through VTT. And I'm sure, you know, Mladen made that point, I think, quite clearly for what's going on in Serbia. For HTT, again, it depends what the country is attempting to achieve. So you would often see HTT reflected in industrial strategy, where people have said this is an area where we need to modernize what's going on. So again, let me use the Serbian example, just because I've been familiar from time working there. So Serbia is now doing a huge amount of work on automotive manufacture for companies abroad. And if I look at the equipment, the production lines, the quality control that's now being brought in by the companies that produce the cars there, this is not new. It's new to country, but it's very definitely not new to other countries. So for the automotive sector, HTT for Serbia has been hugely important in order to make it competitive. The thing about HTT for me is it never makes you best. It makes you as competitive as other people. So it's like having the best pair of running shoes. In the end, it gives you the same advantage of everybody else wearing the same running shoes, but it doesn't mean you're going to run faster than anybody else. So traditionally, it's been associated more with the industrial sectors, but it's very much about what your country wants and why your country sees that as being a strength. So for the Policy Research Center in Belgrade, I would say if you look towards your smart specialization strategy, and I would hope if you look towards your industrial strategy, that is where you will see the sectors that have been identified through a lot of analysis and number crunching as the ones that will now benefit from VTT and HTT. Hope that starts to answer the question.
Oh, for sure. Thank you. I think there is a question that might be coming from the YouTube, but it's not very clear here. So if that's the case, if we don't have any other point, I will give the floor to Manuela Prina. Thank you, Manuela, for taking your time for being with us today. Yeah, so I would ask you, Manuela, as our head of unit, to conclude the meeting and give some final words. Thank you, Manuela.
Thank you, Jan, and thanks to Lisa and to the team of experts that has been working with us with really a lot of passion and dedication. Thank you very much. I think that it's important to repeat what Jan just said also at the beginning of the meeting. We started this research a bit exploring a dimension which we have also tried to make graphic in the logo of this project, which is a puzzle where there is a jigsaw which is missing and it's trying to plug in. And this jigsaw is the skills dimension. So when we look at growth, we look at innovation, and we look at technology transfer, is important to ask ourselves also how the skills dimension plugs in. And I recall actually discussing this with someone who is also online today, who is Nicoletta Marchiandi from the Chamber of Commerce of Torino. And the first time we discussed about this project, she was saying, why ETF is getting involved into this? You are working on vocational education and training. And when we discussed then how actually skilling, upskilling and reskilling is becoming really a strategic component of investments, of acceleration, and of course of competitiveness, and in turn of job creation, in fact, because that's what we are after. And finally, of course, of economic sustainability and inclusion, which is really what we want to achieve in societies. Then we started really to explore what are the questions and to see how the skills dimension actually, in fact, as we saw in the research, takes different forms. What this research taught me is really that it's very true that when we talk to companies and entrepreneurs, we see that skills is probably the factor which is voiced out as to be the one most in need for anything, for being on the market, but also for innovation, for growth. And at the same time, is probably the factor which is left to the most, not studied and not specific planning. And this is also part of what we see in terms of sector investments and sector strategies. And I think it's important to underline that, as you know, this year for the European Union is the year of skills, and it's the year of skills exactly focusing on the role the skills have in supporting growth and in supporting innovation that turn then in job creation. And this is extremely important to make the skills component something which is really planned and taken care of as much as all other components of an investment and of a technology transfer process. So we see much attention in many sectors on infrastructure or on creating conditions for access to finance, but we know that all those elements actually are not enough if also the skills dimension is not part of the solution. So how we intend to move forward with the results of this project and of this research is, of course, to continue the journey, to plug in the skills dimension in the smart specialization strategies and priorities of economic sectors in the region, and to dedicate more time and efforts to the role of skills, in particular upskilling and reskilling for economic competitiveness, growth, and of course cohesion across different regions. We have a series of appointments ahead of us. I think we have also a slide. There will be a series of webinars where we will be sharing results also of other studies that we are conducting, in particular looking at the changes and the role of different organizations in providing skills services, always in the context of enterprise development and workers development. But we will also go back to the research that we have presented today in mid-June to look a bit broader to innovation systems, and in particular to look at the role of vocational education and training providers and how they contribute to really create skills ecosystem that are actually supporting innovation and innovation development for the future. We have also foreseen in the project what we have called some coaching sessions, in particular identifying some topics that are linked both to motivating and creating really opportunities for upskilling and reskilling, in particular in the agri-food sector, which is a sector we are focusing on in the region. And also we will be looking into internationalization, which is another dimension of growth that requires also specific skills that sometimes are, let's say, underlooked when we talk about investments and programs in the region. We will have then in the second part of the year a networking event which will bring together the different components of the project, and in this event we will also start a foresight on the future of skills in the agri-food sector in the region, looking in particular at the innovation dimension and the competitiveness dimension. So as you see in the slide, the little logo is really to remind us that it's important to plug in the skills dimension. And while really this research pushed us as ETF a bit out, I would say, of our comfort zone, I think it's really enriching, and it's showing to be really important to talk about skills, not only when we look at formal education, but more and more to think about how we bring in the skills dimension in specific programs that target innovation and growth. So I would like to thank all of you, thank the research team, and thank the ETF team and Jan for leading on this component of the project. And I hope to meet again soon and to have you part of the other events that we will organize on this subject. So thanks to all.
Thank you all. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Ina. Thank you, Laura, also for the amazing work and collaboration. Thank you, Manuela. And that's it, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, dear participants, for joining us. Goodbye.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye.